I think there's been an increased focus on the individual. I think historically, of course, learning is all about what an individual learns, but there historically has either been a focus on a class of people in terms of a group that's got to learn a certain topic, or there was a focus on an actual subject area. So you took a class in some subject area, a mathematical area or a scientific area or a English literature or some other kinds of things like that. And I think increasingly now we see a real focus on what does that individual need to know? What do they know now, and what do they need to know in order to continue to grow and continue to do their jobs better? So I think one of the evolutions in learning is a real focus on the individual. I think a second huge change, and this is perhaps the greatest change, and that is the whole area of technology. That we see many, many more technologies impacting the learning process than we have. And I'm not just talking about the internet here, I'm also talking about just evolutions of things like software, evolutions in things like graphical presentation, animation. A lot of various kinds of tools have been brought to bear on the learning process, and that wasn't possible before. And then the third and most obvious one is the amount of resources that are available to us today. It's really mind-boggling how much access we have to how many different kinds of information in how many different places, different languages, different levels, etc. So I think learning has been dramatically impacted by simply access to resource. We also see that there's an interesting phenomenon going on right now, and it's often attributed to the Khan Academy, which many of you are already familiar with, and that's this notion of flipping the learning process. You know, historically, the classic education model has been that information is imparted to students in a classroom, and then they go home and they practice that information and they try it out, and we used to call that homework. What we're seeing now more of, where people are saying, you know, the information actually could be imparted by the person could learn that information on their own, and the instructor or the teacher or the coach or whoever's helping that person is better able to help them with the actual application part, not necessarily the transfer of the learning part. And there's another interesting concept that came back, probably it goes back a number of years now. It's gotten new names to it. If you think about in a software application, it often was referred to as context-sensitive help. This idea that I get assistance based on wherever I am in a particular process or technique or method. And in the case of learning, that got translated into learning on demand. In other words, I don't want to take a course on Excel and learn everything there is to know about Excel. I may only want to know how to do a single formula. This notion of how do I make learning available in very small chunks, small pieces. Some people started using the term drip learning, so that I only get little drops of learning as I need them, rather than this idea that I'm going to send somebody away for a one-week course. Historically, we've kind of been processed into saying I have a bachelor's degree, or I have an undergraduate degree, or I've been through some training program. And the idea was that we built up these degrees, and once we had those degrees, we were supposedly learned people. And I think increasingly we're seeing this notion of, I really don't have either the time or the money for a full-fledged traditional degree program, but I really am interested in is a credential. I'm interested in some kind of program that demonstrates that I mastered a certain body of knowledge, a certain methodology, a certain programming technique, and that there's some reasonable chance that I can show some credential that allows me to demonstrate that to a prospective employer, to someone even within my own company where I might want to move into their department, and I can show them that I actually know how to do those things. So this idea of of distance learning, I think, is going to literally disappear, because it probably doesn't have a big place in the question of learning. And so in the same way that we used to talk about video-based learning, or now we talk about e-learning, I think we actually are going to see more and more people just focusing on learning, and distant learning is going to just sort of be a term from the past. So we think that that distance learning is just sort of, the word distance is going to start disappearing, and people are going to say, where are the resources and where are the inputs that might be useful to this learning, and make sure that those voices and those experiences become part of the learning experience. And so the notion of distance will, I think, begin to drop away. So when you say where does it fit in, it'll be kind of integral to everything we do, but we won't even notice it as we go forward. I think there's a level of thinking that's going to go on before the learning process that individuals are going to have to be responsible for in a way that they've never been before. They've historically been processed through. They've been sent to training. Now they're going to have to increasingly say, well, you know, I really need to strengthen my skills in a particular area, and what's the best way for me to do that? And how are we going to make sure that whatever I'm learning, that I can in fact apply? And then finally, there's the organizations and what they have to do. And the organizations are going to clearly have to continue and invest in the underlying technologies that enable all of this to happen. They're going to have to make sure people do have access to the kind of tools and techniques and methodologies that will make it possible for their employees and their staff to have the kind of information and the kind of experiences necessary to, be building on their skills. And this isn't going to be an easy proposition. I think what you're going to see in the future, though, is the organizations that are willing to make those commitments. They're going to make the investments in the technology, but also the investments in recognition and reward. I think you're going to see those organizations absolutely surge ahead of the organizations that have continued to process the whole learning experience in the way they have in the past. So I'm pretty excited about what's going to happen. As you can tell, I think technology has made an enormous difference. It has been a transformative kind of effect right now on what's going on, and I think it's only going to accelerate.